So thank you very much, distinguished Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to address the high-level political forum and present the third voluntary national review of Armenia. The last 4 years were unprecedented due to the pandemic, acts of aggression, ethnic cleansing, and refugee crisis. Although these negative developments could potentially overturn the efforts towards the Agenda 2030, Armenia proved that it is possible to deliver on the promise of the SDGs and create hope for progress, prosperity, and peace. Therefore, Armenia's third VNR is about the experience of resilience, humanitarian action, and steadfast efforts towards transforming the SDGs into real benefits and building back better, with strong bearing on peace and justice at home and in the region. It is a real-time example of the impact of the nexus between humanitarian action, development, and peace on the achievement of Agenda 2030. Allow me to present a brief overview of each of the elements of the humanitarian, development, and peace nexus, and their interplay in Armenia's experience of implementing the SDGs. So, humanitarian action. Struggling with the consequences of COVID-19 pandemic, Armenia had to face yet another calamity. The large-scale military aggression of Azerbaijan against Nagorno-Karabakh in the fall of 2020, 10-month-long blockade, starvation, and the ethnic cleansing of the region in 2023 claimed thousands of lives, caused massive destruction and humanitarian crisis. More than 115,000 forcibly displaced refugees, the entire indigenous population of the region, fled to Armenia over a few years under the threat of persecution and atrocity crimes. On October 26, 2023, by the government decision, temporary protection status was granted to refugees from Nagorno-Karabakh, providing access to social protection mechanisms, healthcare, education, and psychological services for refugees. The government's efforts and the solidarity of the Armenian society were instrumental in addressing immediate and medium-term needs of the refugees. Over $160 million has already been spent from the national budget for accommodation, food, and other essential needs through direct cash assistance and other relevant mechanisms. At the current stage, the government has launched long-term housing program as well as taking concrete steps to address the employment issues of the refugees, 1/3 of which, teachers, medical workers, entrepreneurs, have already been employed or started their own businesses. In addition to above-mentioned challenges, in 2021 and 2022, the Republic of Armenia faced large-scale military aggression and occupation of its sovereign territories, which in its turn resulted in internal displacement and major violations of the rights of people residing in bordering regions. At the time of finalizing Armenia's third VNR for submission, Armenia faced another climate calamity due to torrential rainfall and severe flooding in May 2024 in the Lori and Tavush regions of Armenia, with significant damage to 9 urban and 28 rural communities and the critical civilian infrastructure. Mr. Chair, the next component, development. Against all odds, Armenia maintained a steady pace of progress and sustainable development. Institutionally, the main development priorities of Armenia were formulated in the Armenia Transformation Strategy 2050, aimed at eradicating poverty, promoting food security, stimulating human development, and environment-friendly economic growth. Major economic reforms, effective fiscal policies, and inflation targeting contributed to the steady growth of the economy, with up to double-digit GDP and the overall improvement of the country's socio-economic outlook. This enabled the government to deliver on its promise of leaving no one behind. In this regard, establishment of the social emergency support system has been a key undertaking. The system, while continuing social assistance to the most vulnerable, conceptually aims to empower them to graduate from social dependency to self-sufficiency through income generation. The overall unemployment rate in Armenia in years 2020 and 2022 has decreased from 18.2% in 2020 to 13.5% in 2022, and the percentage of the population living below the national poverty line decreased from 1.1% to 0.8%, lifting thousands above the poverty line. Armenia is committed to building a knowledge-based and inclusive economy. Highly educated and talented people have always been the competitive advantage of our country. With this in mind, the allocation of resources to education has registered more than 25% growth during the past 4 years. Aiming to improve quality education, the government has introduced merit-based compensation scheme of professionals and has been progressing on its commitment of constructing and renovating 300 schools and 500 preschools by 2026. To ensure sufficient nutrition of school children, the government nationalized and is successfully implementing school feeding program in 10 regions of Armenia. The government of Armenia is paying special attention to STEM education and relevant platforms as a link to higher education and later high-tech industry. Here, allow me also to introduce the recent significant initiative of building the academic city that will ensure coherence and synergy among education, research, and industry. Armenia has elaborated a comprehensive agenda for green transition with equal focus on climate change mitigation and adaptation efforts. Specifically, in 2021, the country adopted its nationally determined contributions for 2030 with the commitment to reduce its GHG emissions by 40% by 2030 compared to 1991 levels, as well as to increase the share of green energy production along with other provisions. To coordinate and monitor the implementation of the provisions of Paris Agreement, the government has established an interagency coordination council. Another major undertaking related to country's green transition is the Green Armenia platform, which aims to ensure a high-level policy dialogue on green transition with its major development partners. The biggest refurbishment and overhaul of the country's nuclear power plant is in conformity with international nuclear safety standards is also key to country's carbon neutral development. Additionally, investments in renewable energy sector with an ambitious goal to triple the share of solar energy production to at least 15% by 2030 is high on the government's agenda. Peace at home. The government of Armenia has been steadfast in its efforts to achieve peace both at home and in the region. We strongly believe that sustainable development can be achieved only on the firm bedrock of strong democratic institutions, protection of fundamental human rights, justice, peace in society and in the region. Truly believing in the citizens' say and elections to be the most peaceful and civilized way to resolve domestic political crisis, in 2021, government of Armenia decided to conduct snap parliamentary elections regardless the extreme security challenges that the country was facing. It is noteworthy that these elections once again were marked as fully free and fair by all reputable international observation missions. These elections reconfirmed that democracy in Armenia is irreversible. Building on the will of the people, the government has continued major reforms in governance and judiciary system, strengthening of democratic institutions and social protection, and the uncompromised fight against corruption, which are among top priorities for Armenia, regardless of already accomplished achievements. Armenia has also been consistently promoting women and girls' rights, their empowerment and meaningful participation in decision-making processes in all spheres of public life, both on regional and national levels. Noteworthy, women are assuming leadership positions in legislative and executive bodies with steadily increasing representation in security and law enforcement structures. Democratic resilience was also instrumental in fostering the strong public support for the government's initiatives to achieve peace in the region. This brings me to the last, but in fact most crucial undertaking of our country within the last years to achieve long-term peace and stability in our region. Armenia is genuinely engaged to conclude the agreement on the establishment of peace and interstate relations with Azerbaijan, anchored in the principles of mutual recognition of each other's territorial integrity and delimitation of the state border based on the 1991 Alma-Ata Declaration, and unblocking regional transport infrastructure based on full respect for a country's sovereignty as jurisdiction, as well as the principles of equality and reciprocity. With this understanding, Armenia has initiated the Crossroads of Peace project. This project aims to develop communications between Armenia and its neighboring countries, thus transforming the whole paradigm of relationships in the region from confrontation to mutually beneficial cooperation. Armenia also continuously undertakes significant efforts towards full normalization, establishing diplomatic relations, and opening borders with Turkey, which, if successful, understandably will have huge positive impact on the whole region. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, I would like to emphasize that based on the lessons learned from the third VNR, Armenia will continue its efforts towards overcoming structural constraints and vulnerabilities. Advancement of democracy, human rights, rule of law, gender equality, special focus to the most vulnerable will serve as a backbone for our future action to achieve the SDGs and prepare for post-2030 actions. Thank you very much.
Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Germany, to be followed by Greece.
Well, thank you very much. Germany thanks both countries for presenting their VNRs. Our comments and questions are dedicated or directed to Armenia. Well, we are impressed by the commitment with which Armenia is engaging in multilateral UN processes and supporting the VNR process. We congratulate you on this manifold reform processes and your determination to shape Armenia's future on the basis of regional peace, democratic principles, and the rule of law. The German government is prepared to continue to support you on this path. In the chapter on education, the report rightly discussed the new vocational training law that integrates social inclusion and educational offerings for all sections of the population. The review shows very clearly Armenia's progress on increasing the share of renewable energies in energy production and in the area of decentralization and local development. Your approach of promoting local democratization processes and transparency is fostering just national development, fully in line with the 2030 agenda. I would like to ask two questions specifically about the report. While your previous VNRs had a subchapter for each SDG, the recent report is built around three overarching thematic areas with a focus on the various SDGs without any indicators. What was the reasoning behind this new approach? And we welcome that Armenia's VNR includes a chapter on the challenges and future actions. What, in your view, are the essential key measures to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 agenda in your country?
I thank the distinguished representative of Germany, and now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Greece, followed by India.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to congratulate both delegations for presenting their VNRs. Our question is addressed to the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Armenia, whom I commend for his very comprehensive presentation. In the context of implementing SDG 13 about climate action, there are countries which are particularly vulnerable to climate change, such as mountainous countries. Can you elaborate on the specific vulnerabilities of Armenia as a country with prevalent mountainous ecosystems and any actions for adaptation to climate change and building resilience towards new shocks and adverse impacts? Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Greece, and would like to give the floor to the representative of India, followed by Turkey.
Thank you, Chair. If I could be allowed a question both to Armenia and Nepal, while congratulating them on their presentations. In the case of Armenia, it is impressive how progress is being maintained in the face of multiple shocks. Something that we're wrestling with in India is how to think of a growth strategy in the modern world. And I just wanted to ask what Armenia is choosing to do to attract investment, particularly in newer technologies and newer sectors. In the case of Nepal, it is known in development circles that Nepal has been successful in its fiscal consolidation, and I would like to hear any insights on how Nepal has managed to continue progress in on fiscal matters over many years. Thank you.
I thank you, the distinguished representative of India, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Lithuania.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of Lithuania, I extend my gratitude to both delegations for the great presentations. Congratulations to Armenia on their third voluntary national review. Your significant progress since the last review is commendable and reflects your strong commitment to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. One of the key points of your VNR messages is the reference to the concept of democratic resilience built on the foundation of rule of law and public trust towards institutions. One of the key elements for building such a public trust is ensuring zero tolerance against corruption. Could you please elaborate more on the policies or laws which you think have been the most impactful for Armenia in terms of combating corruption? Thank you.
Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of LGBTI stakeholder group, followed by Eritrea.
Thank you, Vice President. I'm Lilith Avetisyan, an LGBT+ activist from Armenia, representing the local civil society organizations and coalitions. We welcome Armenian government's third PNR report and acknowledge its commitment to reaching all SDGs, despite the crises of the recent years. We respect Armenia's agenda on peace. We witness Armenia's attempts to advance the democratic institutions and green transition. But we are also here to remind about the groups who are still left behind because of persistent gender-based violence and discrimination. We appreciate the state's reforms in the educational system, but we still have LGBT+ adolescents who don't have access to education because of violence and discrimination at school and at home. We still have survivors of sexual violence and abuse who cannot be treated respectfully by law enforcement and whose experiences are disrespected publicly by state institutions. We appreciate the state's efforts in implementing the legal and judicial reforms, but we still have vulnerable groups who face hate crime and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, who are left without explicit court decisions and don't have access to justice. We appreciate the state's tremendous efforts in crisis response, especially for displaced people, but we also witness gender bias and discrimination, which leaves women with multiple backgrounds and marginalized communities behind. As a state committed to the values of not tolerating the violence and discrimination, what are the planned strategies, policies, and specific actions to change the atmosphere of impunity and to make the existing legal regulations and support
I thank, now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Mexico, followed by the distinguished representative of Lebanon.
Thank you, Chair. Mexico congratulates both countries on the presentation of the VNRs. Our question is to Armenia on gender equality. As the Secretary General's SDG report shows that only 15.4% of Goal 5 indicators with data are on track, and women continue to be disproportionately affected by multiple crises and underrepresented in the decision-making levels. So could you share Armenia's experience of promoting women's full, equal, and meaningful participation in all areas of public life, including at decision-making level? Thank you, Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Mexico, and I would like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Lebanon, followed by the children and youth major group.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen,
At the outset, Lebanon would like to congratulate Armenia and Nepal for their successful presentation of their VNR, highlighting their commitment to achieve the SDGs. As well, we wish to direct one question to Armenia. As mentioned in your VNR, education is a prerequisite for the human development. What are the policies undertaken by the government of Armenia to ensure quality and inclusive education for all, in particular women and girls, refugees, persons with disabilities, and other vulnerable segments of society, and to equip them with relevant skills for job market and provide lifelong learning opportunities? Thank you.
And now I would like to give the floor to Uzbekistan.
We thank Armenia and Nepal for presentation of the VNRs. We would like to acknowledge the efforts of both countries in the empowerment of women and girls, poverty eradication, and introducing renewable energy by increasing the share of solar energy. I would like to address my question to the Honorable Minister of Armenia. The access to global markets has always been challenging for landlocked developing countries due to their structural vulnerabilities, which impact achievement of the 2030 Agenda. What measures are being undertaken by Armenia as a landlocked developing country to overcome these challenges and develop efficient infrastructure and better connectivity? Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Uzbekistan, and this is the last speaker on my list. I now invite the presenters to briefly respond to the questions from the floor within about 4 minutes. And I give the floor to the representative of Armenia, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for your questions and for your interest. Indeed, the words that have been said can only encourage Republic of Armenia to take bolder steps to achieve the SDGs, and we're only happy to see that the steps that already have been taken by my government and my colleagues there in Armenia are tangible, are efficient, and also are seen for our international partners. Believe me, this is very important for us. Of course, understandably, I cannot now come up with very deep answers and detailed answers to your questions, but I will take care, dear colleagues, these distinguished representatives of the countries and organizations, that the proper answers would be delivered to you. Now I will do my best to make just a brief, quick overview in given time. So why divided or why based on 3 components? Well, the answer is very simple, dear distinguished representative for Germany. We just try to be more innovative and also taking into account the challenges, the specific circumstances that we had there in Armenia and around Armenia, and the steps that have been taken by our government. We thought it is proper to combine the SDGs and the steps taken by the government in these 3 specific groups. I hope this attempt was successful and justified. About the investments and economy, well, in my report I have already spoken several minutes earlier about the major economic reforms, the fiscal policy, the inflation targeting, some other steps. What I would like to add right now is for instance, the uncompromised fight against corruption, elimination of artificial monopolies, which of course creates a free and competitive environment for businesses in my country. Justice reforms and independence of judiciary is another component, a key component, which gives additional confidence to businesses and investments. So we have all the necessary things, the necessary environment in Armenia. And if you, distinguished colleague, or any other of our colleagues decides to quit the public service or has some money put aside and is looking for a country to invest in, then Armenia is a proper choice. Everything from our side is assured. What is needed is probably some of your own money and creative ideas, but this is not all yet. There are sectors of economy, there are spheres that government subsidizes, for instance, interests for bank loans or gives subventions like agriculture, like high-tech industry. For high-tech industry, we make significant tax exemptions, etc., etc. In addition, I would like to emphasize the infrastructure that is being built, road infrastructure that is being built currently in Armenia. During the recent 3-4 years, we constructed almost 2,000 kilometers of roads, high-quality ones, and also, as you heard, about our efforts to build peace and harmony in neighborhood, normalizing relations with Azerbaijan and Turkey. Then all the pieces of the puzzle are there.